Had a vasectomy, my ex wants to rekindle our relationship and claims she's okay with no kids, but I doubt her sincerity. I'm 33 now, and Leah, obviously a fake name, is also 33. We first crossed paths during our freshman year of university. As fate would have it, we started dating and eventually moved in together. For years, that relationship felt like everything I'd ever wanted, but then, as we drifted through our mid-20s, reality started shoving those questions in our faces, the kind you don't think much about at 18. Leah wanted kids, not immediately but someday. I was certain I never wanted children, period. We ignored the elephant in the room, hoping the other would cave or that time would magically smooth things out, but, predictably, it didn't. When we finally broke up, it was only because of that one huge roadblock. If not for that, I would have gotten engaged right then and there. That breakup left me at a loss. I understood it. I didn't want to rob Leah of something she clearly wanted, but it still hit me hard. There were moments during that year after we broke up when I was seconds away from calling her to say I'd changed my mind, desperate to get her back. Looking back, I realize I don't even know if I really would have accepted fatherhood or if I just wanted to say whatever it took to rewind time, but thank God I never made that call. Somehow, I managed to move forward. In the 8 years since, I've dated a handful of women, including a few relationships I'd call serious. My longest recent relationship ended about a year ago. Not one of those relationships was bad, far from it, but none of them had the spark I had with Leah, which probably explains why they didn't last more than a year or so. After Leah and I ended things, we promised we'd stay friends. Of course, that promise fizzled. Our contact was minimal, and even then, it was all surface level stuff, barely enough to call us acquaintances, let alone friends. But last spring, that started to change. Our rare messages slowly turned into regular hangouts. Officially, we were just reconnecting as friends, two single 30-somethings with a long-gone relationship, nothing more. But let's be real, when you have that kind of history and you're both not seeing other people, something's bound to happen eventually. It took a while, but last week, someone finally changed the game. Over the holidays, I spent a lot of time with Leah, Christmas at my place, New Year's Eve party together, as friends, of course. I suppose that's when Leah decided to tear up the script. When we got together last week, she sat me down and told me she wanted us back together. No pretending, no tiptoeing, she went straight for the elephant in the room, our old issue. She admitted she didn't think I'd suddenly become a guy who wants kids and said she was fine with that. She confessed that although she'd had a few solid relationships in recent years, it had never felt quite right, not the way it did with me. Reconnecting over the past year only cemented for her that what we have isn't something she can fake with someone else. She said she doesn't expect us to pick up where we left off, that she just wants to try again, whatever that means. She told me to think about it. And now, here I am, feeling a little lost. Of course, because I'm a tactical genius, I waited until now, after months of realizing I still have feelings for her, to actually think about what I'd do if she came back into my life like this. Part of me wants to rush back in. But even though Leah said she was okay with me not wanting kids, she never explicitly said she no longer wants them herself. I should have asked, but, processing bombshells and all that. Now I can't help but wonder, are we just setting ourselves up to kick the same can down the road, both hoping the other changes their mind? After all, I've had a vasectomy, which means there's no negotiating on my end. Would Leah truly be willing to give up on having children for me? And if she is, that's not exactly a small sacrifice. Am I prepared for her to wake up years from now filled with regret when it's too late? Then there's another fear gnawing at me. If we dive back in, no matter how quickly or slowly we go, what if things fall apart again? The first breakup was hard enough. A second round? I don't know if I could handle that blow. I know what I have to do. I need to have this conversation with Leah, lay everything out, including the vasectomy, when I see her in a few days. I'm not expecting some magic answer to fall out of the sky. I just need to face it all head on and figure out what I really want, and what she truly wants, before we risk getting hearts broken all over again. Update 1. I had already invited Leah over for dinner on Wednesday before sending out my original post, and as the day drew closer, it felt at once far too soon and yet like I couldn't possibly wait any longer. When Leah arrived at my place, I decided there was no sense in delaying the big conversation. I knew it might cast a shadow on the evening, but honestly, I wouldn't have made for good company with that pivotal talk looming over us. I started with the good, telling Leah just how much I loved having her back in my life and how every feeling she had voiced last time was mirrored in me. I confessed that I'd never felt the way I feel with her, either then or now, with anyone else. But I had to be honest and admit that she'd guessed correctly, my position about having kids hadn't changed. I told her I'd had a vasectomy, and if we were to really try again, I'd need to know she was truly okay with this. I couldn't bear thinking she'd be sacrificing something only to regret it down the road. I let her know how much I want this second chance with her, but if I can't give her the life she wants, if she would be happier with someone else, then she deserves to go find that happiness, even if she hasn't yet. Fun fact, telling the woman you love that someone else might make her happier than you is not, in fact, fun. Leah listened and told me she had a feeling the conversation was heading this way, and that her decision wasn't made on a whim. She opened up, saying she had always pictured herself with children at some point in her life. It's not as though the desire suddenly vanished. She remembered thinking she absolutely needed kids by 30, until she found herself past that point and surprisingly content with how things were, kids or not. She reminded me about her niece, who she adores, and her nephew on the way, and admitted that even before we reconnected, she'd been questioning whether she truly needed kids of her own. She even revealed that this changing outlook was part of why she let herself get close to me again. She said she couldn't claim she's now categorically opposed to having children, but that at this point, she wouldn't see not having them as a sacrifice, more as a choice that feels right to her now. Maybe I'm not the most objective person, but I have to say, it was a pretty damn convincing sales pitch. As she'd suggested before, I agreed that taking things slow was the right move. I told her I'd understand if she wanted to re-examine her choice later and only asked for honesty if that moment ever came. But with all this out in the open, I asked if she'd go on a date with me at the first opportunity, if she'd have me. She smiled and said she'd love to, then teased me about calling it a first date as if we hadn't already spent months in intimate one-on-one dinners together, including this very evening. I laughed and told her that by the end of this next date, I hoped she'd notice a significant difference between those times and this new beginning. Getting the big talk out of the way early proved to be the right choice, and the outcome was extremely positive. The rest of the night was just lovely, not drastically different from our recent hangouts. Some flirting, gentle touches, a goodbye hug that lingered longer than usual, but it simply felt right to be with Leah, to let myself show how much she means to me without pretending my heart doesn't skip a beat every time she smiles. So here I am, floating on cloud 9 while planning our first date. It feels good. I'm not sure there will be another update for a while, but right now, I'm just enjoying each step of this new chapter with Leah. Update 2. Our first date didn't go according to plan, which is funny because I had actually planned the hell out of it. I had a reservation, the kind of dumb surprise I knew would make Leah roll her eyes and smile at the same time, and a bottle of wine already chilling at my place for later. Then, an hour before I was supposed to pick her up, my phone buzzed. Leah's sister had gone into labor early. Her brother-in-law was grabbing the bag and driving her to the hospital. Leah was on niece duty. She asked if I could come over, and not in a flirty come-over way, in a hey, do you want to build a blanket fort and watch a movie with a 4-year-old because I might be here all night? Way. So we pivoted. I stopped for mac and cheese and popsicles, and 20 minutes later I was getting introduced to a tiny whirlwind who immediately informed me she was allowed to jump on the couch only when Auntie Leah says it's okay. Leah gave me the don't you dare look. I ceremoniously decreed that the couch was temporarily closed for jumping due to a very serious blanket fort construction project. We cooked, which means I stirred while Leah contained elbows and enthusiasm and a wooden spoon. We watched Frozen for what felt like all of 2013. I got assigned the role of Cheese Man, a title bestowed with great solemnity and revoked once when I misjudged the ideal butter-to-powder ratio. Around 9 p.m., crisis struck. Mr. Pounce, the bedtime rabbit, was missing. This was apparently catastrophic, like DEFCON 1 with pigtails, until we found him in the washer mid-cycle. Leah tried to be the voice of reason while a small person sobbed about bubbles. I pulled Mr. Pounce out, wrapped him in a towel, and sat on the kitchen floor with a hair dryer while telling the very serious tale of how Mr. Pounce bravely went on a submarine mission to rescue socks lost to the deep. By the time he was half dry and fully heroic, the sobs had turned into hiccuped giggles and then, mercifully, sleep. We didn't get our dinner reservation. We got 2 mugs of tea at someone else's kitchen table under a nightlight, whispering so we wouldn't wake a toddler and the neighbor's dog who had opinions about hallway footsteps. Leah's phone buzzed updates from the hospital. Everything was progressing, then not, then maybe C-section, then wait. It was a strange kind of quiet, not solemn, exactly, but a pause big enough to fit a lot of truths. She asked again if I was okay, not just with the change of plans but with all of it. I told her the thing I hadn't quite said out loud yet, which is that I'm committed to the choice I made about kids and I don't want to drag either of us through hopeful maybes. She nodded and told me another piece of her side. Years ago, after we split, she'd gone to a consultation about egg freezing. She said she sat in a clinic that smelled like disinfected hope and listened to numbers and timelines, and walked out feeling like her whole life had turned into a graph. She didn't end up doing it. Not because it's bad or wrong, but because she realized she was trying to control something she didn't actually, definitively want. If that changes, she said, it changes. I won't pretend otherwise. But I'm not treating this like a rush to beat a clock. I'm treating it like a life I want. It wasn't a speech. It was just, plain. I told her I believed her. I do. At around 2 in the morning, the maybe C-section turned into definitely C-section. We held hands on a couch that had seen better days and waited. At 3:30, her brother-in-law texted that the baby was here, small but breathing just fine, a little early and a little mad. We didn't sleep much after that. I got the 5 a.m. duty of being the human that explains breakfast happens after there's sunlight, which was met with the same suspicion you might expect if you told someone gravity is optional on Tuesdays. The sun, of course, did not negotiate, and when it finally showed up we piled a disheveled aunt, a bedhead niece, and me into my car and drove to the hospital with Mr. Pounce riding shotgun. Hospitals at 7 in the morning are a strange mix of exhausted and brand new. We found the right floor and then found Leah's parents, who did a double take at me and then pulled me into one of those hugs that start as politeness and end as real. Her mom was crying and laughing in the way that leaks out of every mother in a hospital corridor. Her dad shook my hand in his stoic way and then gripped a second too long, which is dad code for I know who you are. Leah disappeared to go scrub in and see her sister while I sat on a plastic chair and read a picture book about a duck who wants to be a truck for the 14th time. When Leah came back out, she was holding a swaddled bundle the size of a loaf of bread and smiling with her whole face. She said, "Do you want to meet him?" And for a half second I had the urge to bolt, not because of the baby but because of what a moment like that means in a life like ours. I stayed. He yawned like a tiny old man and made that ridiculous newborn squeak that makes you laugh without meaning to. Leah handed him back and tucked the blanket with a practiced, gentle touch I'd forgotten I missed. I felt something in my chest that had nothing to do with wanting one of my own. It was wanting this, her, like this, part of a world I could step into without having to become someone else to do it. On the way out, Leah introduced me to a nurse as her partner without thinking. It slipped out as natural as my name, and she didn't correct it. I didn't, either. Later, back at my place because it felt like we needed a space that didn't smell like hand sanitizer, I burned pancakes and we laughed about it until it was definitely not funny and then funny again. We finally had our date, if you can call a mid-morning diner run in half-slept clothes a date. We sat in a booth, shared a milkshake because we were too tired to commit to two, and made it official in the easy way that comes when the hard things are already spoken. We're together. Not pretending, not trying to be cute about it. We're us, with all the caveats and clarity and ridiculous, stupid good timing. Before she left, I said one more thing. I told her that if she ever feels that tug so strongly that it changes what she wants, I don't want it to turn into resentment or martyrdom or anything that rots from the inside. I want her to tell me right then. She said she would. She told me I could say the same if being around her niece and nephew turned something inside me. I said I would, even though I don't expect it to. We sealed it with a kiss, not the hungry kind or the cautious kind, but the kind that made the last 8 years stop shouting and start humming. That night, while I was brushing my teeth, my phone lit up with a photo. Leah, hair a mess, eyes bright, holding her nephew who was wearing a hat the size of a tangerine. The caption said, "He already likes Mr. Pounce." I stared at it for longer than I want to admit. Then I set my phone down and realized something had shifted in a way I didn't see coming. The fear I had about doing this again, about blowing up twice, had been the loudest thing in the room for a long time. It isn't gone. But it's not in charge anymore. I don't have a grand moral or a new position to announce. I have a reservation I canceled, a fort blueprint on a napkin, and the knowledge that when life threw us something messy, we made space and chose each other inside it. It felt like the right test for us to accidentally take. And now I can't wait for a boring date where nothing happens except a meal and a long walk and Leah's hand finding mine because it can. Update 3. We finally got our boring date. It was a Tuesday, which felt appropriately unglamorous. We ate pasta at a place that's good at salt and heat and pretending not to notice when you don't give a table back for 2 hours. We walked home on a street that used to be ours and is trying to be ours again. Back at my place we did the grown-up thing where careful means you say what you mean out loud and you look each other in the eye while you say it. For me, that was vasectomy, years ago, all clear tests, no change of heart. For her, still choosing this. Then we stopped talking. A week later Leah texted that she was late. It was one of those ordinary moments a sentence can knock flat. I was in an elevator, the doors opened and I forgot to get out. I forgot how to breathe with all the air I'd apparently been hoarding. I called and she picked up on the first ring and said, "I'm probably just stressed," which is exactly the kind of thing you say when stress is suddenly a math problem. I stopped at a pharmacy on the way to her place and bought tests in enough redundancy to satisfy NASA. I also bought saltines and ginger ale because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. We did the ritual on her bathroom counter, cup, timer, instructions printed in a font designed by someone who enjoys chaos. The first test was a dud. The second was one of those vague answers that turns you into a Google scholar and then a worse version of yourself. We agreed, without arguing about it, to go for a blood test in the morning. In between, we had the conversation I wouldn't wish on anyone and was still grateful to be having with her. We sat on the kitchen floor because chairs felt too formal. We didn't raise our voices. We didn't bargain with the universe. We just laid it out in the plain way we'd been practicing. She said if she was pregnant, she would terminate. It was not a speech and it was not casual. It was a choice with a tremor in it, clear anyway. I told her I would be there for all of it, whatever there needed to look like. I told her I loved her in the space where love isn't a strategy. We cried in that embarrassing human way where your face does what it wants. Mr. Pounce watched us from the back of the couch with judgment only a stuffed rabbit can deliver. That night, when we were past the part where words helped, I emailed my urologist. I'd had 2 all-clear semen analyses after the vasectomy. Years of assuming I was safe. I knew the failure rate was tiny in a lottery you don't want to win way. Suddenly tiny was the only size that mattered. Leah fell asleep around 2 with her hand in mine. I lay there listening to the sound of a building at night when it forgets it's full of people. At 7, we were in a lab where the lights are too bright for gentle news. She did her blood draw with her jaw set like someone choosing to walk through a door she doesn't want to be in the same hallway as. I went across town for my own delightful errand. There is no dignified way to provide a sample while pretending you're a man who has his life together. I did it anyway. I don't think I've ever said thank you to a phlebotomist and a lab tech from a truer place. The blood test came back first, negative. The nurse said the word twice like putting a soft towel down. Leah exhaled so hard she laughed. 20 minutes later, she started to shake, not crying, just letting adrenaline leave her body the way it insists on doing, rudely. We sat in my car in a parking garage and watched a couple argue over a parking space like it was high art. Relief is a strange shape. It fits wherever it wants. We got breakfast we didn't taste and sleep we didn't deserve. In the afternoon, my urologist called with my results in a measured voice. He said there were sperm. A few, modal. Not oops, we missed something numbers, more like biology cheated on a test numbers. He used the term recanalization in a way that was both calm and deeply unfun. He recommended a repeat procedure with extra belt and suspenders measures. He said it happens rarely, and that if it was going to, I'd caught the timing about as well as anyone could. I looked at Leah while I listened. She had one eyebrow up in that impressed but not in a good way face she makes when life tries to get cute. When I hung up, I felt weirdly steady. The other shoe had been dangling over us for years. We'd finally seen it hit the floor and we were still here. We sat down with actual calendars, not metaphorical ones. While I scheduled round 2 of vacation at the urologist's office, we talked about layers. Not because either of us trusts the universe, but because we trust each other enough not to leave this to magic. She made an appointment to talk to her doctor about an IUD. I ordered condoms like I was preparing for a very specific marathon. None of it felt like a burden life was putting on our relationship. It felt like maintenance. Like buying smoke detectors and changing the battery before you hear the chirp. Somewhere in the middle of all that practical, something else happened. My parents were in town. I'd told them about Leah. They wanted to meet her again in the way that says they never stopped remembering her. We went to dinner at a place where the menu is a love letter to mushrooms. There was a moment, the moment, that's been looming since I was old enough for people to look at me like a future instead of a person. My mom asked, in a voice that tried for casual and landed on careful, if life had changed my mind about kids. It was the sort of question you can dodge with a joke if you want to make tomorrow harder than today. I didn't. I said no. I said it with the same tone I'd use to describe a city I've chosen to live in. My dad looked out the window like the waiter might be carrying in an answer on a tray. My mom nodded and reached for her water and then reached for Leah's forearm without meaning to. Okay, she said. The word had 100 years in it. We went back to talking about mushrooms. Later, walking home, Leah threaded her arm through mine and didn't say I'm proud of you because she knows that phrase makes my hackles go up. She just squeezed once like a telegraph and changed the subject to the world's ugliest dog she'd seen in a shelter window on our route. I had the redo last week. It is not, as it turns out, a procedure you can charmingly narrate. The surgeon was professional and a little too fond of the phrase good insurance, which, in this context, meant cauterization plus a bit of surgical origami to make sure any stubborn biology stays in timeout. Leah drove me home armed with frozen peas and the kind of bossiness that belongs on a battlefield. She set up my couch like a fort without the fabric and enforced the Netflix to ibuprofen ratio. At one point she pulled Mr. Pounce out of a bag with the straightest face on earth and set him on my shoulder like a parrot. I have never felt less dignified and more taken care of at the same time. A few days into recovery, when walking from one end of my living room to the other felt like an achievement worth a ribbon, Leah's sister FaceTimed us. The baby was scrunched and furious about nothing. The niece climbed into the frame to inform me with great gravity that Mr. Pounce is not waterproof and that some bunnies need brakes. Leah laughed so hard she snorted. I took a screenshot of the 4 of us mid-chaos, a newborn squinting at existence, a 4-year-old doing quality control on stuffed animals, my partner with her hair and a knot in triumph in her eyes, and me with 2 bags of vegetables and a rabbit on my shoulder. It didn't look like a life we were improvising. It looked like one we'd picked on purpose. I don't have an epiphany to sell. We got scared. We did the ugly, necessary talking. We reinforced the foundation and then we checked on each other's stitches and ordered soup. The universe spun the wheel and landed on rare, and somehow it felt less like a test than a reminder. This is the team. This is the plan. This is the person whose hand I'd like to be holding whether the lab says yes or no. Update 4. The plan after the redo was simple, boring. I was going to become a man whose calendar held only unremarkable boxes, follow-up appointment, groceries, a movie where nothing explodes. The universe heard boring and decided to add a soundtrack and a pyrotechnics team. First, the IUD. Leah's appointment landed on a Wednesday afternoon heavy with rain. The waiting room had a ficus that had seen things and a stack of magazines about a type of wellness that requires linen. Leah's doctor was kind in the unfussy way that makes you want to nominate her for office. She explained the T-shaped device like it was a tiny superhero. Leah nodded like someone preparing to meet a small, well-meaning villain. I was allowed to stay. There was a light exactly above the exam table that turned the room into a stage you don't want to be on. When the doctor said, "You'll feel a cramp," Leah's hand found mine and did a squeeze that should be named something fierce. She swore once, a single elegant profanity that landed with the precision of a haiku. It was over faster than either of us expected. Afterward, Leah sat in a chair eating saltines with the focus of an athlete and declared, through a mouthful of dry crumbs, "I am an absolute champion." She was. We went to a drive-thru like teenagers and ate fries in my car while the rain made an argument with the windshield. It didn't feel like a burden we'd signed up for. It felt like, okay. That's one more brick in a wall we're building on purpose. 2 days later my follow-up semen analysis came back, 0. The nurse said none detected in a tone so soft it almost became a blanket. I sent Leah a screenshot and she responded with a gif of one of those parachutes in elementary school gym class, swallowing a bunch of kids whole in the text, redundancy is sexy. We were quietly triumphant in a way you can only be about things you hope no one ever has to celebrate. Then we adopted a dog on accident. We were walking past the shelter with the world's ugliest dog in the window, the one Leah had pointed out on our way home from telling my mom about mushrooms. We'll just meet him, she said, a sentence that has never in the history of shelters meant anything but your house is about to contain more hair. He was there, still magnificently unfortunate, one ear up, one ear crumpled like a receipt, an underbite you could hang a coat on, the body of a potato, and eyes that said he had written a novel about loss. He leaned into Leah like he'd been waiting since Tuesday and then looked at me with the resigned hope of a man approaching the rental car counter. His name on the intake card was Spud, which neither of us could say without laughing. He came home with us that day because there was no universe in which he did not. Spud is equal parts chaos and sincerity. He snores like a kazoo and believes doorbells are war crimes. He also sits on your feet like he is anchoring you to the planet. The first night he discovered mirrors and spent 20 minutes trying to convince his reflection to fight him outside. The second, he learned that Mr. Pounce is an ambassador, not a chewable. We FaceTimed the niece to show her the new recruit. She immediately informed me that Mr. Pounce is a gentleman and that some dogs don't know about respect yet. Spud sat down, seemingly chastened by a 4-year-old diplomat. We were in the honeymoon phase of ugly dog domestic bliss when Leah's landlord sent an email so chipper it should have arrived with a cupcake. The building had been sold. Everyone had 60 days. The sentence was a shrug in Arial, we wish you the best in your housing journey. That night we drank tea on her couch and stared at a wall that had been a wall for a long time. We didn't bench press a decision. We let it walk into the room and sit down with us. The next morning, while Spud did perimeter checks like an animated baguette, we said it out loud, move in. Not a trial balloon. Not pretending it was purely logistical. It was both practical and the next honest thing. Life, true to form, added a water feature. 2 days after we gave notice, a radiator valve in Leah's bedroom decided to reenact Old Faithful. I got a text that was just help. I ran the 6 blocks like a man in a movie who thinks he is faster than physics. The hallway smelled like steam and metal. Leah's room looked like a sauna tried to become a lake. We did the kind of immediate triage you only see in ads for paper towels. Towels everywhere, books stacked in frantic towers. Agnes the Fern relocated to the bathtub like a queen in exile. Spud took one stunned look and retreated to the doorway to provide moral support and occasional whines. The super was on his way, which is New York for learning to play the violin. We made calls with one hand and balled up sopping quilt with the other. It was stupidly intimate and deeply unromantic and exactly the kind of moment that makes you see the shape of your life. 2 people in socked feet scooping water with baking sheets and laughing because the alternative was swearing. Until the building collapsed. The radiators calmed down. The landlord sent a crew armed with fans that sound like airplanes. We moved her essentials to my place that night, Spud trotting between us like a small worried usher. It was a soft move and that became the move in. Her toothbrush next to mine. Her sweater on the back of my chair. Mr. Pounce perched on a new shelf as if he'd always known the view would change. The niece visited the next weekend for 90 minutes that stretched to 3 hours because nobody wanted to leave. She came with a backpack full of plastic food and the crushing authority of someone who had recently learned the word technically. She surveyed our living room, which looked like 2 lives negotiating a truce on a rug, and announced, "This is good for forts." We constructed one that would have impressed an engineer. Mr. Pounce was granted a corner office. Spud took quality control seriously and ate 1 clothespin. In the middle of boxes and forts and learning which neighbors have the loudest opinions about dogs, we had one small, strange curveball. Spud ate a grape. Just one, dropped in the kitchen by a human whose name rhymes with mine. We Googled with the speed of guilt and became instant experts in veterinary triage. The emergency vet clinic was bright in that particular fluorescent way that makes you think about every choice you've made. A tech with pink hair and a voice like chamomile tea took him in the back, and we stood there holding hands and leashes, feeling like the parents we are not and the partners we are. Spud re-emerged having survived both the grape and the indignity of preventative measures. He was fine. We drove home at midnight, relieved in that hollowed-out way where even the streetlights look like friends. Somewhere in all of that, the nurse at the urgent care for Leah's radiator injury, it turns out sliding on wet hardwood while carrying a box of paperbacks is a sport, called me her husband. It slipped out of her mouth and landed on the floor like a coin. We didn't correct her. Not in a way that was coy. In a way that said the language will catch up. We unpacked slowly because we're people, not montages. We held up 2 identical corkscrews like a magic trick and kept both, because you never know when life will ask for wine and a backup plan. We found a stack of notes I wrote to no one the year after we broke up, printed because I am a dinosaur who likes paper. I hadn't meant to keep them. They were a museum of sentences I never had the courage to send. Leah read them sitting cross-legged on the floor with a look that made me want to go back in time and hand that kid a glass of water. She put them back in the envelope and said, "We can keep these or we can burn them." We didn't do either. We put them on a high shelf and let them be what they are, an artifact of a country we don't live in anymore. There were other small firsts that pretended to be nothing. Leah introduced me to a neighbor as my person and then bit her lip like she hadn't meant to say it exactly like that. My dad texted a photo of his grill and the words, "Do we need a bigger table?" My mom asked if Spud had a winter coat and then, 20 minutes later, a package arrived with a jacket so puffy he looked like a cinnamon roll in outerwear. We had breakfast 3 mornings in a row at the same hour. We found a rhythm that didn't ask us to be anyone else. On a Sunday night that smelled like tomato sauce and wet dog, Spud had rolled in something that required 3 shampoos and a negotiation. We sat on the couch under a blanket that had somehow become ours. I said the quiet thing out loud. That this felt easy in the way that isn't lazy. That if we want a piece of paper later, we'll get it for us, not for a story we were told. That I don't need a ring to understand that I'm already doing the job. Leah tucked her cold feet under my thigh and nodded like she'd been waiting for me to catch up to a sentence she'd known the shape of for weeks. We are not done with rare. We are never going to be done with maintenance. There will be another follow-up for me because none detected likes to be said in pairs. There will be an IUD check and the ongoing comedic parade of condoms and calendars. There will be more dinners where someone tries to triangulate our choices and we say no gently and then talk about mushrooms. There will be nights when Spud throws up a sock he shouldn't have swallowed and mornings when Mr. Pounce needs his dignity protected from a toddler's enthusiasm. All of that is, somehow, the point. This morning, before work, Leah handed me a coffee in a mug she brought from her old place, the one with a chip from sophomore year. She kissed my cheek in a way that made time shut up. Spud sighed the sigh of a creature who believes in nap-based solutions. The fort blueprint is still on the fridge under a magnet shaped like a tomato. It looks less like a blueprint now and more like a map I already know how to read. We didn't get boring. We got something better. We got ordinary in the kind of way that makes you look around and say, yes, this exact life, chosen on purpose, even when the radiator explodes. Especially then.